What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be doing a review on the Edge EZX module for 23 plus Power Stroke Super Duty trucks. This is a cool product. It's been on the market for a while, but I've been able to test this since the day it came out, so I can actually give you guys a long-term review. Is this thing worth it? Let's find out. So to start out with, what is this module? If you are not familiar, and I think a lot of people get a little bit confused about what this module is, because it's kind of a lot of different things, let's get into this. This module is basically going to allow you to adjust power on the truck. You're actually increasing horsepower and torque on the truck over factory. This module is also going to allow you to adjust pedal sensitivity. So if you've heard of pedal commanders, Banks pedal monsters, things like that, this is a similar product in that it's going to allow you to adjust those settings on the truck. Beyond that, it also has a lot of capabilities that you could only get out of like ForceScan or some other similar programs like that. It's going to allow you to adjust the tire pressure sensors on the truck so you can change threshold. It's also going to allow you to read codes on the truck. You can also check emissions readiness on the truck. You can do a bunch of other little things like turning on the fog lights with the high beams. And it's possible Edge may actually add more to this as they get deeper into these trucks. But for now, this is actually a pretty cool module and that it allows you to do a lot of different things. Now, a lot of people are gonna ask, how does it modify power without voiding my warranty? Because this is a fully emissions intact and fully warranty safe product to add power. And to kind of show you that, I'm gonna show you guys how this is installed because you'll actually get a pretty good idea of where it's modifying the signals on the truck to accomplish that. All right, so I wanna take a moment to show you guys where all the connections on the EZX are. So first, we are going to be connecting right here at the air intake. We are also going to be connecting right here, the mass airflow sensor. This for me was actually the hardest connector to get to. One, because I have the eVenture, accelerometer there, but also just access in there is very difficult. So that was a pain in the butt. And then the other connector that is also kind of a pain in the butt is the rail pressure sensor. Now that is located way down in there. You can kind of see the fresh connectors there. It's at the end of the rail that you can see right there. That connector is not the most fun to get to either. And then inside the truck, we are going to be connecting at the pedal position sensor. You can see that connection right here. And then on the passenger side, you can see there's my wire fish that I use to get it through. And that connector comes right here and connects into the CAN bus connector right here, this gray connection. This one is by far the biggest hassle. In the Edge instructions, it just magically appears on the passenger side of the truck, but in the real world, we have to somehow get it over there. So that by far took me the most time out of anything on this. Definitely a pain in the butt. And I would recommend some sort of tool like this to try and get it through because there's no straight shot. There's a lot of stuff in the way in the dash. There's a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, that wasn't very fun. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of a better perspective on how this thing works. Essentially, the way it's adding power is it's going to be modifying boost and rail pressure sensors on the truck to alter the signal slightly. Now, this isn't modifying the actual ECM on the truck, right? The calibration, the tuning is still completely factory. What it's altering is the signals being sent to the turbo and to the injectors and back to the computer. And it's gonna modify those and actually add power to the truck. So if you have a standard output power stroke, you're gonna be seeing 60 more horsepower and 140 more foot-pounds of torque in the highest setting on this module. If you have a high output like me, you're gonna see 45 horsepower and 112 foot-pounds of torque more in the highest power setting. And that doesn't sound like much, but I gotta say, behind the wheel, you definitely notice a difference. So let's get into the actual drivability of this module. Like I said, I've had this on my truck for multiple months now, and so I've been able to drive to work in it, I've been able to go off-road, I've been able to tow with it. So I've been able to get some really good feedback on what this thing actually drives like. And if you've driven a high output power stroke, it is not slow in stock form. I was just recently towing 11,000 pounds between Los Angeles and Vegas, and coming off stoplights, I would literally be roasting the tires off a stop on dry pavement with 38s and factory 31 gears. That's just insane. So like these trucks are definitely having a ton of power stock, but with this module on there, it's even more power, especially in the mid-range. I noticed like climbing hills with a trailer on the truck, anything where you're like kind of in that mid-range power band, it just seems to have a much flatter curve. It doesn't quite as exponentially come up. It just has a really nice linear curve of power from when you get onto it from a stop all the way through until you're past the power band, basically, you're at 3,000 RPM. So I gotta say, really, really impressed with how this module drives. It's easy to drive. It's not too much power. It's not too aggressive. It just feels natural on the truck.
Speaking of aggression, that is where the pedal sensitivity adjustment comes into play. Now to me, I personally felt like I had to leave the truck between settings 1 and 3, give or take. Anything past that, and I found to have kind of annoying downshifting. If I was cruising on the highway and just kind of rolled into the throttle gently, the truck would think I was flooring it and drop like 5 gears. And that's true of really any pedal position sensor modifier, right? Doesn't matter whether it's a Banks pedal monster or anything else. If you're sending a truck a signal, giving it 20% throttle in real life, and the truck thinks you're giving it 60%, it's gonna grab for a bunch of gears. And to me, that just was kind of annoying. So it's fun off of a stop, but past that, I just didn't find it to be super useful or drivable. So settings 1 through 3, most of the time I honestly just left it in setting like 1 or 2. I found to be very usable. Now in terms of everything else that this module provides, I thought it was really useful. The app is great and easy to use. You can pop in there and you can either adjust power settings, you can adjust how aggressive your pedal is, and you can also go in and change things like turning your fog lights on with your high beams, which I immediately did. Or you can change your TPMS threshold on the truck, which is also useful, right? Before this, you would have to use ForeScan, which is a PC-based app. It's a little bit, counterintuitive for a lot of people. I had already done that on this truck, but this is just so much easier. I can go in and plug the values I need. So for example, I'm running 38 13.5s. Obviously the door sticker pressures, obviously the tire pressures on the door sticker are out the window. So I'm running 38 front, 28 rear with no light on the dash, no warning, and I have my TPMS threshold set to go off at like 15 PSI, so it just doesn't bother me unless there actually is a problem on the truck. So again, super useful, nice to have, and way easier than having to do it in ForeScan. I do have one gripe with the app, however, and that is if the app needs an update, it will essentially lock you out of the app. And this happened, for example, one time when I was towing a trailer. I hooked up to the trailer and I was like, my pedal sensitivity is a little too high. I'm gonna go in and adjust it down. I went to open the app up and I was greeted with a warning screen that said I had to update the app before proceeding. Now, I wouldn't mind if there was a dialog box that said, hey, update this next time you get a chance. But locking me out of the app is a bit annoying. So I would like Edge to change that. That is probably my really only complaint with this, is that if it needs a software update, you are locked out of the app until you perform that update. I kind of get why they do it. I guess they see it as a safety concern, but for me, it's just kind of annoying to be locked out of the app until you have, 5-10 minutes to update the app. It's just, I don't know. I feel like it's unnecessary. Beyond that, I really have no complaints though. This module kind of does everything it's supposed to do, and it fits a really unique niche in the market, right? There's options for way more power on the market, but it voids your warranty. There's options for emissions defeat tuning on the market, but it voids your warranty and makes it so your truck is not smog. There's other tuning devices that allow you to change TPMS on the truck, and there's other products like the Banks pedal monster and stuff that let you do pedal sensitivity, but there's nothing that lets you do everything all in one device, keep your warranty, and keep your emissions compliance. So if you're in the camp like me where you want to maintain factory warranty and you have to maintain emissions compliance, this is pretty much the only and the best product on the market, and I have really zero complaints about it. It does its job, it does what it needs to do, and I would say this made an actual notable improvement in the truck. And I really did a lot of testing, right? I would drive an entire week in fully stock settings, then turn the tuner up to power level 5 with stock pedal sensitivity, and you really notice a difference. Like I mentioned, it was kind of in that mid-range power band, but there's a legitimate difference. Like 45 horsepower, 112 foot-pounds of torque is a noticeable change. And if you have a standard output power stroke, that's even bigger, right? You're seeing 60 horsepower and 140 foot-pounds of torque more than stock. One other thing I want to talk about in terms of drivability is something that I think a lot of people asked me was, does this increase DEF usage and does this add to the particulate filter, right? Am I having way more frequent DPF regens because I'm adding power to the truck? And in my head, I figured it would, right? I figured you're adding boost, you're adding fuel, it's gotta make a difference. But even in longer towing trips, in longer commuting, if I had a heavy foot, I really honestly didn't notice any difference in DPF regen frequency or DEF usage on the truck. Maybe there was like a small, tiny difference that I couldn't pick up on, but it seemed like having a headwind or a slight hill made more difference in the truck than running it in Tune 5 versus 2.1. So that was pretty cool to me, right? I figured there'd be a bigger difference and there wasn't, but for those people that are concerned about that as being an issue, to me, kind of seems like a non-issue based on my usage. And that's something that I really wanted to gather some data on. This is why I didn't review this immediately when it came out. I wanted to gather a couple of months of data on this, but I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed. So is this module worth it? I would say yes. It's definitely not cheap, but the install is pretty easy. It does its job and it does everything while maintaining factory warranty and compliance. And I think that's kind of cool, right? There's other options in the market. I'm sure those are gonna be a lot more useful to people once their warranty on their truck is up. But with a truck this expensive, modern diesels are pretty complicated. I would never wanna lose my warranty over gaining a couple horsepower, personally, right? That's just me. But this is a pretty cool product. It does everything it needs to do. And I would say I would buy this again if I had to. So if you have any questions about this that I did not answer, please let me know down below and I will cover them. But overall, very impressed. And I think this is a pretty solid offer.